Copyright on this material of Serious Questions belongs to Beverly Lutz, who is also the narrator for this series and author of the book, God Doesn't Care What You Wear: The Limitations of Our Beliefs. Welcome to my first audio in the series of Serious Questions. I'm delighted your curiosity brought you here. I'd like to begin first by saying that I am using the current world situation, more specifically the COVID-19 virus, to push your buttons. Anyone who has taken classes with me knows I do like to stir the internal pot, to dig out pieces that have been hiding away, yet having an impact on how you live your life. By using this situation as a trigger, my intention is to provoke and invoke some deep self-honesty in addressing long-held beliefs you may have, for example, regarding life in general, health, dying, identities, and control, to name a few. And no, these questions are not about the virus and whether or not it exists, nor are they about masks and whether or not to wear them, nor are they related to what some deem as conspiracy theories. Rather, the questions are designed to get you to ask yourself questions about your beliefs, not those given to you by others or the media, rather what you believe and intuit regarding the issues I will put forward. You may wonder why I feel there is such benefit in this type of self-exploration. What I can tell you from my experiences throughout many years of teaching and having a thriving client practice is that I realize the underbelly of all unwellness and illness seems to have some deeply rooted beliefs, making them a core necessity to explore. When one is open and willing to put aside preconceived ideas and to step into an uncomfortable arena, the result is generally profoundly freeing, as well as very often resulting in healing, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. I understand and appreciate that these questions may well challenge your perspective on the situation resulting from the virus and require sitting in discomfort as you self-explore. For many, it may mean needing to step aside from reactivity to shift from those strong preconceived ideas to a more expansive perspective. For those unwilling to even engage in a perspective different from their own, it's unlikely you will listen beyond here. I offer you, stay curious, be open to exploring, and notice there are questions within questions besides the lead question. And very importantly, if you're really interested in exploring your deeply seated beliefs that are at play with this current situation, notice every time you feel an argument, a disagreement against what I'm saying. Notice any resistance. These are all invitations to look more closely, to dig around a bit in your pool of beliefs, and to be open to a different perspective. To be clear, I am not saying I am right about anything ever. I am simply offering you the opportunity to self-investigate, to chew on what you believe and why you believe as you do. I am well aware there will be great disagreement with my points of view. And again, perhaps that offers ever more opportunity to question why you disagree so strongly. So now, let's go to serious question number 1. Have you ever thought about why you don't like being sick? Okay, so that might seem like a ridiculous question to which most of us will reply with, why would I ever want to feel sick? So, well, it may not be your preference. You've most likely been sick at various times in your life, like with a nasty flu of high fever, vomiting, and diarrhea. Haven't you? Remember being stuck in bed for a few days just because you felt so awful, even if you didn't have a label for it? Or what about that last really miserable cold when you had a nonstop runny nose and couldn't stop sneezing, along with a hacking cough that made your head feel like it was going to split wide open? So you've been sick, right? So have I. So seriously, back to what is wrong with being sick. Experts in epidemiology will tell you that every 4 to 6 years, the flu virus, for example, will be more virulent. Well, you may have been very sick indeed, in bed perhaps even for several weeks with what you might have described as the absolute worst case of flu you've ever had. Did you feel the need to go to the hospital? I mean, we do know that antibiotics do not work with viruses. And indeed, there is no known pharmaceutical treatment for a virus. As well, most of us know just to follow the basic suggestions. Stay at home, drink lots of fluids, stay in bed, and rest, rest, rest. Now, I'm certainly not saying this strain of the coronavirus is not a virulent one. It appears it is. The symptoms, however, do vary widely in keeping with general virus symptomology. While many people are barely affected by this current virus, many others experience a normal flu-like response and are sick for a week or more, while a small percentage suffer severe and sometimes prolonged symptoms. Sadly, and very, very tragically, some have lost their lives during these past few months due to complications. So yes, you could perhaps get this virus, and you could perhaps be very sick. And I appreciate your preference is to stay well, a preference I share as well. Certainly, if you're concerned and not feeling well, then stay at home. If you have a compromised health condition, then you do need to take precautions, as with any virus. Yet, there appears to be a kind of madness around needing to prevent getting this current coronavirus. And I can't get this virus because I could die. Belief that is actually running the show. Somehow, in the underlayer of this, the fear has become deeply embedded that getting this virus could kill you. And as I see it, that is how, in large part, this madness of what I view as overreactivity started. Going back to my comment about being very sick with the flu and staying at home in bed without even thinking of going to the hospital, I can't help but wonder how much overreactivity has people rushing to hospital when they could and probably would recover more quickly at home, without the fear being further embedded just by virtue of being in a hospital. Besides the emotional cost to both the patient and the healthcare people taking care of them, what about the financial cost for hospitalization to the patient and to the system? So, a good reminder to help a return to some sanity is that the vast, vast majority of people who actually get this coronavirus with some or all of the symptoms are simply sick with nasty flu-like symptoms. And they recover. I have a close friend, for example, who, along with 3 family members plus an infant, came down with verified COVID-19, and all were bedridden for a week. Ill and very tired. Later, my friend said, I have been more sick with other flus, but the fatigue was quite overwhelming. I have another friend who says he was very sick indeed, and at one point considered going to the hospital, which in the end he did not. And he recovered quickly. Yes, some others are going to have a more severe reaction to this coronavirus. And do remember the percentage of severity is very small. Fear and the resulting anxiety and stress are far more potent than any virus in terms of damaging one's immune system. The more fear and stress take over, the more your immune system's ability to fight invading pathogens is diminished. So I ask, why exactly do you have fear over this virus? I understand, yes, it is virulent, and yes, you could be very sick. Yet why such fear? Where do you see yourself in the fear spectrum since this coronavirus began? Have you noticed a serious increase in anxiety over the past few months? Have you asked yourself any of the questions I've raised here? It is important to ask yourself some questions in terms of what you believe regarding the current situation. Is there an honest reason to be fearful? What I mean is, have you created a story around this virus in relationship to you? Think about this. If you don't have the virus, what is there to be fearful of? And are you willing to change the narrative of your story from fear to realizing that in this moment, you are healthy, alive and well, and grateful to be so? How would you feel if you simply became more proactive in keeping your immune system healthy? If you do what you can to be more proactive, you will find yourself relaxing more and reacting less. By the way, I'll discuss ways to maintain and boost your immunity in several audios later. Now on to serious question number 2. Stay curious. Beverly is an inner freedom coach who works with individuals and groups around the limitations of beliefs. So on to serious question number 2. Have you noticed if one of your primary needs has become the need to know the number of new cases of the COVID-19 on a daily basis? Further, is it important to you to know the number of daily deaths? Do you feel these figures accurately present the situation, or do you feel they are misrepresented? The media, and more importantly, those feeding the media information, have, from my perspective, been incredibly socially irresponsible in misrepresenting the data, along with their alarming and fear-producing presentations. Indeed, are you aware of how just the continuous use of the term COVID has actually become a trigger word, inducing anxiety and fear from the very way it is spoken by media and others, like a killer lurking around your corner? So let's review a few things. All flus are from a virus, which is why an antibiotic will do nothing regarding the symptoms. This current virus, labeled COVID-19, is in fact a coronavirus, and this is certainly not the first coronavirus experienced by humans. Indeed, since the year 2000, we have had 2 other coronaviruses, SARS and MERS. Viruses, in keeping with their nature, have a survival mechanism, which is why they adapt to survival by slightly changing their form. They mutate. So yes, there is a new strain of the current COVID virus. While this new strain may appear to be more contagious, the severity of symptoms from virus mutations are generally less severe, as is already being noted. So let's go back to the beginning of what I'm calling this madness. Someone, somewhere, considered to be an authority, declared this strain of coronavirus to be a pandemic long before it was ever an official pandemic. That set off a domino effect so that the very word pandemic was spoken continuously, embedding it in everyone's consciousness. Fear was set. Yes, the numbers sound alarming when spoken multiple times a day on every media possible, and the numbers appear to be increasing is because the reason numbers appear to be increasing is because through the created fear panic, more and more people are rushing to get tested. Prior to this surge, if people were not feeling well, but were not seriously ill, many simply stayed home. Now, with the push to have everyone get tested, it's obviously pushed up the numbers. But here's what I want to ask you in relationship to this. When do you ever recall the numbers being given on a daily basis when there was a severe, more virulent flu season? Or for that matter, with the SARS or the MERS epidemics? As I mentioned in the first audio, every 4 to 6 years, there will be a more virulent strain of, for example, the flu virus. You will absolutely hear about it through the news, and friends will tell you what a nasty flu it is, and you very likely will experience it yourself, flu shot or not. Yet my point is, do you ever recall hearing daily fear-invoking reports saying how many new cases of the flu there were for that day? No, when in fact there is no way to even trace the number of positive flu cases at any given time because reporting new flu cases has never been implemented. Deaths also occur from the flu due to complications, as well as with both the recent epidemics mentioned. And although deaths were occasionally mentioned by the media, no numbers were given as they are today with this virus. Further, when can you ever recall going for a test to determine you had the flu? Never, right? So why would you now dash to get tested if you have even the slightest of any symptoms that are apparently associated with this coronavirus? Ask yourself, why do you think it was determined that the numbers should be released and on a daily basis, no less? Now, I realize those in opposition to what I'm asking would reply it was the most logical way in which to control the spread. Yet I wonder. Such fear-provoking tactics psychologically go a long, long way in creating a mass agreement, including an almost hysterical compliance now to the absolute need for a vaccine. Of course, it's each person's choice to vaccinate or not. Yet what I find disturbing about the manner in which the vaccines are being pushed is that this is giving those in compliance reason to point their blame fingers to all non-compliers as not being for the good of others. I don't know about you, but the very intent of separating those who have had a vaccine from those who have not is both shocking and highly alarming. Doesn't the idea of mandatory vaccine hit some huge alarm bell for you? Sure does for me. And the proposal for a vaccine passport is so seriously dangerous and disturbing that I really have no words. Have you really thought about what these mean in terms of your personal democratic freedom? So why is it that you make sure you hear those numbers? What do you feel in your body every time you listen to the news and hear those numbers? Please remember that a huge number of those who do test positive are actually asymptomatic, meaning no symptoms at all. In fact, as of October 28th, 2020, that number was over 40%. Now, add to that the huge number of folks who do get symptoms which are not severe, and we've covered a very large number of positive cases. I'll throw in here also that the rapid tests are now proven to not be so reliably accurate, as stated on NBC November 21, 2020. In case you missed this, Elon Musk had 4 COVID tests done in the week of November 16th, 2020, all on the same day, all the exact same test, all done at the same facility, all administered by the same nurse, and all processed the same. 2 tests showed positive and 2 showed negative. Now, I appreciate there's a huge American focus on the number of reported cases of COVID-19 and the number of seemingly COVID-related deaths for the United States. So let's look at some pure numbers. For 2020, up to and including November 22, 2020, in the U.S., there were 262,390 reported COVID-related deaths. Or we can use the now popular term of excess deaths. This comes out to 0.08% number of deaths relative to the total population of the US. In order for this to even reach 1%, would require huge numbers of COVID-related deaths. True, the stats as of January 1, 2021 show that the number of recorded deaths in the US for 2020 is expected to be the highest in history, albeit the increase certainly cannot be attributed solely to the pandemic. Of course, regardless of the numbers, we can most likely agree that no one wants to see a loved one die, whether their death seems premature or otherwise. Yet, even using the projection of a total of 310,000 COVID-related deaths in the US for 2020, the percentage of COVID-related deaths in the US population would only be getting close to 0.1%. Actually, it's 0.093%, so still a ways to go to even get to that 0.1%. As a side note, please do not confuse the current numbers you are hearing on the media for the number of COVID-related deaths with what I have just cited for the year 2020. Yes, of course, the number is higher now because the data is including 2021 in that total. I would also like to add that not all of the deaths attributed to the virus were indeed medically verified as being attributed to the virus per se. So, besides the 0.093% of COVID-related deaths in the US in 2020 being an incredibly small percentage, are you aware also that over 40% of US folks have at least 2 compromising health conditions? And over 60% have at least 1 compromising health condition? New York Times, March 12, 2020. So, don't you think this skews the data when we know that the overwhelming majority of COVID-related deaths have been among those with compromised health conditions, regardless of age, because their immune systems cannot work to their full potential? If someone is in a long-term care facility, does that not all on its own speak to a diminishing health regardless of age? Of course, there are going to be a lot of deaths in this care facility population, as with any contagious pathogen there. Add to that the various ways in which the healthcare providers unintentionally can pass the infection among the patients. And we are very remiss if we don't also include here the mental impact on all of those in care facilities that this situation has brought to bear. Not being able to see loved ones, being restricted even further in their communications and contacts with others in the facility, I have no doubt further lowered the immune response for many. A tragedy all on its own, not to mention those family members who weren't allowed to be with those in transition. A shame, really. Further, when citing COVID-19 related deaths, no mention is made of how marginalized people and those living in socioeconomically challenged areas of high density, poor dietary standards, and unsanitary conditions are also battling with a reduced healthy immune response, and as a result present another large segment of the COVID-related deaths. And lifestyle choices need to be added in here. Poor dietary habits applicable to large segments of the developed world population. Little or no exercise, poor sleep habits, just to name a few. Yes, of course, in the tragic losses of life from the COVID-19 virus, there have been deaths in otherwise seemingly healthy individuals with no known compromising condition. That happens, not just with this virus, it happens with life. So it's not to say that everyone who has passed away from COVID-related complications had a compromising condition. However, it is important to make the note that the vast majority of deaths occurred among those with less than healthy immune systems. Now, the term excess mortality is a term many preferred at this time. So, to quote, excess mortality is a term used in epidemiology and public health that refers to the number of deaths from all causes during a crisis above and beyond what we would have expected to see under normal conditions. End of quote. Yes, using excess mortality, the numbers are much higher than simply using COVID-related deaths. However, this is not simply due to COVID as many may want it to appear. We are, for example, seeing the highest suicide rate in recorded history. Deaths from drugs have more than doubled since the beginning of 2020. In its own category are deaths from alcohol poisoning and pharmaceutical overdoses. There have been countless deaths that have occurred through delayed urgent surgeries, along with severe lack of medical accessibility to needed health care because of the medical shift in focus. So while many might want to argue that the excess mortality rate shows just how serious this pandemic is, I am suggesting the increase in mortality is not due solely to the current coronavirus pathogen. Further to this, and going back to my comment about the U.S. deaths in 2020 being the highest in history, I want to give some numbers to this. There is a near hysterical tone from the media in saying that the number of deaths for 2020 could turn out to be 3 million, hence the highest number in history. However, what I want to point out is that in the previous year, in the U.S. in 2019, the number of recorded deaths were 2,839,205. So now the horrific 3 million deaths projection is a mere 160,795 over the number of recorded deaths for 2019. Source for the number of deaths in the U.S. in 2019 is CDC, the Center for Disease Control. So now, let's go back to my original question here of why do you feel the need to know the number of new cases and the number of deaths each day? What part of you is that feeding? Are you aware of how fear-provoking just this simple relaying of numbers on a daily basis is? How each day embeds the fear deeper, participating in ever-increasing anxiety, resulting in reactivity? Have you noticed the stress on you just from the constant repeat of the word COVID-19, a phrase which has become symbolic of danger? And here's a big question. How would you be if what is happening did not have a name, a label? I'll tell you a short story to make my point. I had a client years ago with what she described as serious environmental allergies. She would even bring her own sheets to my clinic to make certain she would not have reaction to either the laundry soap I was using or the fabric itself. Everything her family did or didn't do was determined by this client. What movie theater they went to, what restaurants, and even what her children were allowed to play with. It was an amazing control mechanism. One day, I gave her the following homework. I said, what if, when you arrived for this appointment, I had just had the shrubs next to my walkway sprayed, but you didn't know that? Would you have had an allergic reaction? Versus, if I had put up a sign saying that I had sprayed, would that make a difference to you? 3 guesses as to her reply, and the first 2 don't count. So this is similar to what I'm asking you. Because there has been a label put on this current, dangerously life-threatening virus, one that has become seriously embedded in everyone's psyche because of things I've already outlined, how does that impact your reaction to the news? What if this virus did not have a label and was simply a nasty bug going around that a whole lot of people are getting? What's curious to note is whether or not you want to add in rebuttals to what I've said here. Do you want to argue against the logic of the numbers, for example, that I presented? I certainly know lots that do. As I said earlier, I'm not saying I'm right about anything. My intention is to provoke, to perhaps in some way create more curiosity and more openness, more critical thinking instead of mass following. Any numbers I have used are pure numbers, not statistically skewed to give a certain result. Okay, so let's move on to serious question number 3, and remember, stay curious. Okay, serious question number 3. Is there a part of you that has become really attached to the hanging on to this whole COVID coronavirus identity and all that goes with it? Okay, so I appreciate this is a question many might answer with something like, how ridiculous. Yet, as I said, this is a serious question because I see so many people who are so invested in hanging on to this drama. Just think again about those daily numbers and how many people you know who can repeat them to you. Does this include yourself, perhaps? In my own life, I've had a few friends quote the new numbers for the day as a start to their conversation, said often with alarm in their voices. New identities seem to have been formed through the use of masks, along with what appears to be a considerable attachment to both the wearing of the masks as well as the visible symbol of following the rules. Here's something to give some thought to. Can you see that the masks themselves, consciously or unconsciously, keep the threat of getting sick up front and center? Creating super vigilance while keeping the fear that goes with such constant vigilance predominant? Further, if I don't have a mask on, do you perceive me as a threat? That this is being pushed on social and news media is another alarming piece for me. I admit that every time I see someone wearing a mask while driving alone, or even driving with someone else in the car that they obviously know, or worse, someone walking down the street, I want to ask them why they are so attached to their mask. The benefits of being out for a healthy walk certainly gets diminished by wearing a mask, not to mention inhibiting healthy, deep breathing of fresh air. Where I live, when I'm out walking, and yes, without a mask, and if someone is coming toward me on the sidewalk, I will move over to make the other person feel comfortable, and most likely those coming toward me will do the same for the same reason. So where is the risk in that? If someone is driving alone, why the need for a mask? Worse, what about those wearing a mask in their own home? Yes, I'm fully aware this is a respiratory virus and can spread through the air. And if you're in your own bubble, where do you see the risk? Has it occurred to you that the very use of masks for every situation everywhere has further embedded fear subconsciously? So, have you wondered what would happen if the masks were abandoned, people remained respectful of distance, and everyone continued the ordinary, healthy practice of frequently washing their hands? Not with sanitizer, but with soap. Have you felt the need to wear a mask in the past when there was a nasty bug going around? When there had been a serious flu, have you not just simply been more cautious? I mean, you wouldn't invite friends over for dinner if you were feeling seriously ill, would you? Or go to work? Plain, simple, common sense. One point of view that is being shared by many, including a very large number of physicians worldwide, is that by continuing the use of masks and keeping businesses in such restrictive conditions actually participates in prolonging the life of the virus. The virus, like every one of us, wants to live, and it will do what it can to survive. We've already seen the virus's adaptation to survival. If this lockdown and mask scenario continues, I imagine so will the persistence of the more virulent form of this virus. You may have heard health officials making the comment regarding how, as soon as the masks are not being worn and lockdown is not being enforced, that the virus begins to spread more. Well, of course it does. It will have its time, whether I or you or officials wish otherwise. Yes, people will get sick, just as they have from other life events. And more than likely, the virus will run its course a lot faster that way than attempts to control it. To even begin to address the unfathomable damage this overreactivity has created is overwhelming. From the indescribable destruction of countless lives, from financial loss of good, solid businesses and employment, to the highest numbers in recorded history for suicides, to the over doubling of drug overdoses, not to mention the societal damage that will, I imagine, reverberate for many, many years to come. Could it be that this long-term damage is directly due to the overreactivity and fear-producing drama that has been made of this situation, rather than the virus impact itself? According to the National Geographic in December 2020, COVID-19 could push 100 million more people into poverty. And it is estimated 1 out of 6 Americans could go hungry if these pandemic measures persist. Separation is a grave concern for me. As humans, we strive for and thrive on connection. What has been created through this current, contrived or otherwise, situation is completely against human needs. Younger children are being told they need to stay separated in order to be safe, that contact with their friends is dangerous. A both false and very dangerous point of view. No thought seems to be given by the majority to how this will translate out in years to come in terms of these children being able to build healthy relationships. I just heard of a 9-year-old whose parents are going through divorce, which is a challenge all on its own for children, now added to by the current situation. He started to self-harm. He's run away a couple of times, and he has even attempted suicide. This is a 9-year-old. He is desperate to be with friends, feeling some connection, to attend school and socialize, not locked down, isolated, and sitting in front of a computer for hours for his schoolwork. Teens are suffering tremendously from the restrictions, hence their rebellion. While many younger adults are feeling a hopelessness and despair and are speaking out against the restrictions through their actions, many others have succumbed to incredible fear from following mass thinking, like sheep. Many adults, all ages, are having the same experience, suffering in various ways from the separations and restrictions. While the impact is certainly not restricted to any group, those in care homes have been suffering terribly, not being able to see the few people in their lives that they love and need to see. They are lonely, sad, and tired. Besides having an uncompromised immune system by virtue of their being in a care facility, I imagine despair of the isolation has contributed hugely to further weakening their immunity. Perhaps instead of falling into the fear pit, which absolutely weakens your immune system, how about giving some thought as to how proactive you are being about your own health? What are you actively doing daily to keep your immune system healthy? Healthy individuals' immune systems are able to handle this virus, by and large. And remember, the vast, vast majority survive. Ask yourself, how addicted have you become to this situation? For starters, stop being addicted to the news. I know, I understand you want to see what's going on. So one thing I'll do is turn the TV on, put it on mute, look at the headlines at the beginning of the newscast to satisfy my curiosity, and then avoid listening to the parts around the virus and vaccines in particular. It's the need to know piece that I'm suggesting you pay attention to. As I asked way back, why is it that you want to know the numbers? If you're enjoying another day on beautiful planet Earth, enjoy it fully. Remember, fear is a far more potent virus than any organism. And our minds do tend toward the negative. So creating a shift in this can be as simple as changing your response to life through your words to yourself and others. Enhanced emotions, uplifting ones, such as gratitude, joy, love, abundance, wonder, appreciation, trust, connection, are powerful tools. Notice your use of words. Shift what could be to what is in this moment. This simple piece alone is incredibly powerful. Feel the joy of simply being alive in this moment. Negative emotions most often participate in reactivity, whereas responding is just in being with what is happening, without judgment or of making it good or bad. It's just being okay with what is. Our modern world has become quite addicted to drama, to reality shows. The why behind this brings up a whole series of questions that perhaps I'll deal with in another podcast. And for now, are you willing to honestly self-examine, to look and see if you have any attachment to this current drama? Is there a part of you that feels more alive because of this drama? With your new identity of wearing a mask everywhere, of wanting to show your conformity, of having something new to focus on? Ooh, some juicy questions here. In time, most likely the majority of us will get this virus, whether it's the original strain or one of the mutations, with symptoms or not. And by then, as seen throughout other seasons of other viruses, these strains are apt to be much less virulent than the current strain. Now, ask yourself what's your level of self-responsibility in terms of staying as healthy as possible. If you don't want to listen to this short section and want to continue, I invite you to skip to serious question number 4, which is definitely apt to be the most challenging. And if you're interested in a few health tips, here are a few basic, easy to do things that will help keep your immune system strong. For starters, make sure you're getting enough rest and do your very best to be in bed by 11 p.m. latest, and get a minimum of 8 hours sleep during health challenging times especially. As with any virus, be it a nasty cold or even nastier flu, we know that rest and plenty of plain water and other fluids is the best there is in terms of treatment. Severe temperatures will generally pass if these are adhered to. And there are no pharmaceuticals that treat viruses per se. If you're not taking vitamin D drops, which are much more effective, by the way, than the pill form, then please make sure you have at least 5,000 IUs a day of this very vital supplement, particularly during this viral season. Most people who are not taking vitamin D are deficient, unless you're living in a tropical or subtropical climate and are outdoors a lot. Vitamin D is powerful in keeping the immune system healthy, and it needs vitamin K for maximum benefit. So do add K2 to your list. Zinc and a good form of vitamin C are also essential immunity supplements. Ask your health store specialist about the best forms to take. And a really good B complex is an absolute must. And a liquid high-quality omega-3 cannot be missed. These supplements will all participate in keeping your immune system healthy. Of course, the food you eat is vital. Freshly prepared food always, whenever possible, versus pre-prepared. Why? Because pre-prepared foods have been shown to contain very few nutrients. And microwaves, by the way, quite literally kill the energy of food, as has been shown by many studies. Okay, so far we have rest, at least 8 hours of sleep, essential supplements to support our immune system, and freshly prepared foods. Whenever possible, please seek organic sources for your produce, meat, grains, poultry, and eggs. If it's not organic these days, it's very likely GMO, unless clearly stated. And GMO foods appear to severely impact our health. We often forget the power of simple, deep breathing. Whenever you feel some tension in your body, especially given the topic around fear and the resulting anxiety, just stop. Sit down if you can, and if standing is all you can do, that's fine too. Now, take a deep breath in through your nose, not with your mouth open. Through your nose to the count of 6. Pause. Now exhale through your nose for the count of 6. Repeat this at least 5 times, and if you can, 10 times is even better. You will notice after just 1 or 2 deep breaths that your body is already beginning to relax. And exercise. Wow, this cannot be emphasized enough. Get outside regardless of the weather and walk at the most minimal 20 minutes a day, and preferably 40 to 60 minutes a day. If you're looking for good medicine, daily exercise cannot be beat. Exercise increases circulation of the blood and lymph and the delivery system of nutrients. No exercise is actually compromising to the immune system. Take a decision to consciously shift your conversation. Make an agreement with those you live with or talk to that you will not engage in fear-evoking conversations around the virus or anything else. Of course, you want to know if someone you love or care about is not well, and that can be very different in engaging in, for example, did you hear about the hospitals being full kind of conversation. Words are powerful. Remember that. Lastly, and very importantly, take the time to sit quietly for at least 10 minutes a day, and then start to increase your quiet time. If you're a daily meditator, you don't need this reminder of how enormously beneficial this can be. Now, if you followed through to here, next is probably the most challenging question of all the serious questions. So let's go to serious question number 4. And perhaps the most serious and challenging. What is wrong with dying? No, of course, I know you do not want to die, and I most certainly do not want to die. I'm in love with life. I'm grateful for every sunrise and another opportunity to simply be alive, to experience a new day. I certainly feel I have a lot more life in me with many things to do, and I imagine you feel much the same about your life. So it's not about a preference around dying, yet it is a serious question. And from my perspective, one worthy of contemplation. Do you actually feel you have a choice over when or how you die? If that question is honestly examined, there is no other answer than no. So when you're in a deep sleep, you're essentially dead, right? In the sense that you are not conscious. So then, are you in charge of waking up from that deep sleep? Or of not waking up at all? We're reminded almost daily of bizarre accidents, of people dying in strange ways or not dying when they should have died. We have an illusion that we are in charge of life. Let me tell you a story to really drive this point home. I knew a young woman many years back, an Irish gal, very lovely inside and out. She was a professional dancer, engaged to a great guy, and life was good. One day she was driving home after a dress rehearsal. It was daylight, the roads were good, and she wasn't speeding. The light was green, and she was going through it when it just so happened an 18-wheeler ran the red light and slammed into her small car. She lost one arm and the fingers of her other hand. Her legs were broken in a way that meant she would never dance professionally again. Her fiancé decided, when she was still in hospital, that the engagement was probably not a good idea. As is so often the case, the unexpected had happened. She was following all the rules, and life unfolded in a totally unplanned and unpredictable manner. Do you think any of the folks on the 737 MAX 800 crashes thought that this was their last life event when they boarded the airplane? Are you still hanging on to thinking you can control when your final curtain drops? How is it that we have such a veiled illusion, a fantasy really, about dying? After all, the cycle of birth and death is the one thing we all know we have in common. No money is going to buy a different way when it's your curtain call. When it's your time, and your curtain will fall. I was playing backgammon many years ago with an enormously wealthy and worldly powerful man. Somehow in the conversation, I really don't remember how it came up, I asked him if he had ever really thought about the simple truth that no matter how much money he had, he wasn't taking it with him. Apparently there was something about the way I said it that made this a reality for him. Because the next time I saw him, he said that our previous conversation had been instrumental in his changing his life and his focus. So is there a part of you, like this man, that clings to an illusion that although death is certain for everyone else, it doesn't really include you? While your reaction may be to brush off that idea, just sit with this and see if you can find that piece of you that defies dying. Are you able to honestly embrace the reality that you have no idea what the next 5 minutes will bring? And what if you knew for certain that this were your last day of life on planet Earth? How would you spend it? Would you be absorbed with this current world situation, allowing fear to grip you? Or would you be relishing every single moment, choosing with care where to focus your energy? What we have been witnessing and experiencing is how we seemingly are, globally and personally, addicted to attempting to control life. Not just this virus situation, but life itself. And life will not be controlled. While we may say we know that to be true, it is nevertheless not how we generally respond to life. A dear friend passed away recently, not from the virus, but from the unexpected. She had been having some back issues and went in for a serious surgery. The couple of days in ICU were touch and go for her, yet she pulled through quickly. When she was transferred to a less critical care unit, after a couple of days, the person serving meals unknowingly gave my friend dinner. Of course, she was hungry for real food after what had been a week since her surgery, and so she ate it, when it turned out she was still to be on soft foods only. In the night, she vomited and choked and got liquid in her lungs. She died that morning. My friend had successfully survived her surgery and was well into recovery. She wasn't supposed to die. In relationship to the virus, we need to recognize that a virus is a living thing, regardless of whether or not it was made in a lab or a bat soup. And it will run its course, whether we like it or not. Could it perhaps be that measures attempting to control the virus are actually prolonging its virulence? Can you personally see a correlation between the response to this pandemic and a desire to control the outcome? And why do we attempt to prolong life, to defy the natural unfolding? I mean, someone of age 85 can be considered to have had a life well lived, wouldn't you say? They have experienced much. Why are we so attached to keeping them alive? What is the real reason we strive to keep people from dying? When we attempt to control life or to sustain it unnaturally with life support systems, for example, who are we really doing this for? For the person or for ourselves? It's an uncomfortable question, yet could it be that all of this is to keep us from the desperate thought of dying ourselves? If we can kill off this virus, then we will survive, even though there is no absolute assurance of that. As we contemplate the issue of dying, if we are open to our own vulnerability, we will hit our big fear button. Any attempt at controlling life in any form is simply an illusionary attempt at keeping the fear of the end of who we consider ourselves to be at bay. After all, death will mean the end of this personality called Beverly or Annie or John. We humans, it seems, are geared to survival, and we cling to our own life, desperate to hang on as long as we can. I used to fly a lot, and one of the routes was from London to New York. In those days, I flew a lot on Pan Am, and the London-New York flight that I often took was Pan Am 103. In fact, I had been on that very flight just days prior to the incident when Pan Am Flight 103 exploded from a bomb over Lockerbie, Scotland, killing all on board. I can still recall where I was and what I was doing when I heard the news and how seriously shaken I was. As I was very familiar with this flight, I could even easily imagine what would have been happening as the flight attendants would have begun preparing for the dinner service. Now, clearly anyone listening to me here recognizes without argument that I had not had a choice in the matter of being on that particular flight or the other. Would you agree? The realization that I could have died really hit me. It wasn't long after that I made some very serious life changes. So back to wanting to control life and its unfoldings. We now have an incredible rush to get a vaccine to avoid getting this virus because we don't want to be sick, and more importantly, so that the possibility of dying is greatly reduced or indeed avoided. Or rather, that is the perception. I find it interesting that it's not been mentioned that there has been no success in creating vaccines for the earlier coronaviruses, SARS and MERS. Yet in a matter of a few months, it's been heralded that there are now several effective vaccines for COVID-19. I was shocked to hear a physician say on TV that we will only, quote, we will only have normalcy when everyone has had the vaccine, unquote. Seriously? Do you buy that? And of course, as I've already mentioned, everyone has the choice to get the vaccine or not. No one's right and no one's wrong. This is a personal preference. And if you get the vaccine, you are doing so because you believe in its protection. So by virtue of the protection of the vaccine, you should not be concerned if someone you know chooses not to get the vaccine. In large part, I see the media's presentation as being significantly responsible for keeping fear in front of everyone. As well, it seems there has been a lot of political game playing, furthering the separation of people. And separation itself creates fear. Add in the fake news that has made any kind of fact-checking unreliable, and it's easy to see how this further exacerbates fear. I can't trust anyone or anything anymore. Just in realizing that the illusion of trust has been smashed, do you feel unsafe? Any time we attempt to control life, if we go down through the layers, we will end up with our driving human need to feel safe. The dissolution of institutions that is happening all around us, the crumbling of the familiar, combined with a previously unseen world political arena, then throw in the realization that news can no longer be viewed as it historically has been, and it becomes very easy to see how the very fabric of a sense of safety in life is no more. Now, could it be that the drive to kill off this virus or prevent getting sick or to prevent people from dying is perhaps related on a deeper level to the need to feel safe? The reality is that neither you nor I have the faintest idea as to when it will be our time to exit this existence. Yet death, we know, is the one thing in our life as a human being that is absolutely assured. So instead of living in fear of being sick or of dying, instead of creating stories about events that don't exist in this moment, in an effort to control that which cannot be controlled, why not live life to its fullest? It's your choice. Do you want to be living with all the stories of what ifs? Or do you choose to live with what is true for you? Not everyone else, but for you in this moment. I wish you great health until your time is up. Please take care of yourself. Your health is in very large part in your hands. Don't be putting the responsibility on those in healthcare. Be proactive in your own health. And above all, I wish you the courage to sit with some of these questions so that you might see how your involvement, your attachment to this current world situation is keeping you in your own self-made prison of fear. By the way, courage comes from the French word le cœur, meaning the heart. So I wish you a brave heart so that you will live each day as though it were your last. And remember that one day, this day will be your last.